Welcome to the first panel for the 2026 Gen Con Film Festival. We've been doing this for 16 years now. And post-production.
Pre-production.
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 Post-production is Saturday. So if you get all this sorted out, you come Saturday and figure out what to do next.
Yeah.
So, take it away.
All right.
Thank you.
Right. Well, we'll be your moderator. My name is Jared. I run a little animation studio here in Indianapolis, and I've done a little bit of everything on stuff. And I'll kind of be moderating, and then let's go ahead and have each person introduce yourself. Say we got playing.
Sure.
Wow.
I'm Chris Edgar. I'm a writer, director, composer, at least on the indie film side. In terms of my day job, I'm also an attorney, and I work with independent creatives and other entertainment clients. My film in the festival is called Dungeon of Deceit, which is going to be playing at the 3:30 p.m. talk today.
I'm Mike. I'm actually a film teacher, and on set I was cinematographer for a film that's playing here, Bono Amazon. And I get kind of roped in, other than animation, I do a lot of the cinematography and some editing for production.
Hi, I'm Christine Salazzi. I am a SAG actress. I am also a producer. I have a production company called Gremlin Express. Under that umbrella, I do a lot of producing, and then I also do a lot of directing and writing of my own.
Great. Is everyone? So I know some people are familiar with filmmaking, some people not. So I think basically for setting the stage, pre-production is pretty much what happens before the cameras roll. When we're talking on pre-production, I think I did have notes. One of the most things about pre-production is this is where you get organized. What? And then, so I guess to do. Okay. Yep. So kind of everyone, what's your kinds of approaches to pre-production? You sort of start. What is it you start thinking about? What's your approach? Whatever.
Pre-production, I would argue, is probably one of the most important parts of making a film. It's putting all the pieces together to make sure that when you are on the day, you have room for making mistakes, which they will happen. You have room for getting extra additional shots, things that you hadn't thought of, things that you can now see now that everything's set up. I like to be as organized as possible, so I have an entire schedule laid out. I have all of our shot lists already pre-planned, which the director and the cinematographer get together, they create that. We have our scripts all printed out. We make sure all of our actors are off book, because that is a huge part of making sure that your day goes well, is that your actors are also prepared. I would say that pre-production is probably one of the biggest pieces to the puzzle for making sure that your film goes as smoothly as possible.
And for those who don't know, when they say off book, that means that they have the script, their lines memorized.
Oh,
They
yes.
have the script memorized, not just having to hold it or do the common thing of checking it between takes.
Yes.
So.
Thanks, Jared, for
No problem.
clarifying that.
I'm here. It's okay.
I would add to that I found the limitation for pre-production is your time. You could keep going and going and going with your plan, but eventually you just run out of time. And so therefore you pick, okay, what's most important to me? We do a lot of visual effects. So we do a lot of storyboarding for those because they have to be very, very precise. But we'll storyboard those specific and very detailed, and then we get very loose with some of our other scenes. And that allows some flexibility in acting and where we can do some ad lib, that kind of stuff. So you kind of build on a system that works for you. Once you've done a number of these films, I found that everybody I've worked with has a slightly different way and focus of their pre-production, and learning all of them is really helpful, because then you're going to pick and choose which ones works best for you on set.
Yeah, and just I would echo all of that, and just to add to that, I think the most important part for me, particularly when I'm working with people who haven't worked together in the past, is just to make sure that we have a couple of Zoom calls where everybody gets to know each other and ask each other the questions that they might have about what their needs are going to be on set, and meeting them and so on. Of course, because I'm also an entertainment lawyer, It's also very important to make sure that everyone who is going to have any kind of involvement in the film, no matter how small, even if it's your mother, right, that you have some sort of a contract. Because ultimately, I mean, even if there never turns out to be any disputes with anybody, like the kind of thing that you need a contract to resolve, you ultimately, particularly if you're shooting a feature, you're going to want to get distribution. You're going to, in other words, sign an agreement with a distributor who's going to make sure that your film gets onto all of the big streaming platforms and ideally into theaters and so on. And the distributor is going to want to make sure that you have a contract with everyone who worked on the film to make sure that what's called the chain of title is clear. In other words, that no one's going to come back and say, hey, wait a second, I own the copyright to part of this film, so now distributor, you owe me money. That's what they're paranoid about. That's why it's important to have everything in writing, even if everybody continues to love each other after production is done.
And then, besides the getting your contract stuff out, like, who are the people you like to assemble first? When you're starting your pre-production and you're putting together your team, who are like the first people you like to pull into your team?
For me, it's the assistant director and producer. I mean, I've worked with the same AD and producer for my last 4 films, Kate Fogarty, who I feel like I would not be able to accomplish anything without. And just she and I talking about whether it's realistic to do what I've written in the script, because I'm acting in both the capacity as the writer and the director. Just having her to bounce ideas off of, or a producer who's particularly going to take into account the practical aspects of, number one, do we have the money to do these shots that you're talking about? And number 2, do we have the time, considering that we're going to work 12-hour days, and if we have kids, which I had in my most recent film, Dungeon of Deceit, they're going to have to work reduced hours by law, and so we're going to have the time for them to shoot everything that they need, just to have someone to bounce logistical issues off like that.
So the initial question was, who do you include up front?
Like, yeah, who are those first
So
team
it's-
members?
It's producers and directors. Is where we start. On occasion, we'll contact our lead, who we want for lead, and include them, especially if we already have a script in hand, and just get their feedback. But yeah, I reiterate the same thing.
As a director who's heavily involved in the producing process, my first person is usually my DP. I like to shoot very stylized, so I want to make sure that before we bring any producers on board, we're like, okay, here's the vision. We're going into it knowing exactly what we want, and then we can find producers who can help us build from there.
And then, and then what do you think are kind of like some of the biggest, like, pre-production kind of struggles that you think people kind of start with when you're doing that? When you're kind of assembling the team and putting these together, what are those kind of hurdles they need to look for when they're trying to put those people together?
I could go. Ours is always casting. Casting is a big piece for us. Is getting the right person for the right part. So we get that done. We feel much more confident once we've hit that stage of pre-production. Before that, it's like, do we have the team we need for the project?
Are you guys doing casting yourselves? Casting
We are,
director?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, as an independent, and you'll find that as
Yeah.
well. You're doing everything, so yeah.
And then are you using like Actors Access or any of that stuff when you're looking for
We do, which is nice because we do have an industry in town, so we're connected with people who are also connected, so that's really been helpful. So yeah, networking is a key component for us, and so often that's our focus. Who do you know they can fit this film?
I think for me, like I said, I do stylized absurd comedies, so it's very specific. So making sure that I have people on board who understand what we're looking for exactly can be a little bit difficult. A lot of times because it's very specific, we like to break the rules and it's not formulaic, and so finding people who are willing to go outside of their comfort zone can be a little bit of a struggle. But yeah, I think overall it would, pre-production as a whole, putting the puzzle pieces together, it's always gonna be a little bit of a struggle. If it's easy, worry about your production day.
Yeah, I would say, particularly if you're dealing with an indie film and multiple locations, making sure that you can fit your movement to all the locations into your schedule and also all of the camera setups, because what you're gonna find if you haven't been on a movie set before is that the camera setups take the longest amount of time of anything that you do on the film set. It's not gonna be shooting the actual take. It's gonna be the DP and the gaffer and first, ideally there's a first and second assistant camera, but if it's an indie film, that's not necessarily guaranteed. You can spend a long time lighting the shot and getting the right lens and so on. And so building out the schedule so that it takes into account the amount of time that's going to be required for that, I think is the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest challenges.
And knowing too, like the difference between what shots take what thing, like dialogue scene, simpler, faster. You're gonna get through those easy. Your setups are gonna be easier. You have an action shot. Sometimes that one shot can be your whole day.
Yeah.
Like one shot,
Yep.
one angle, whole day, depending on how complicated it is, and having to kind of plan that out can get crazy, and that's part of breaking down your script too when you're scheduling. And that gets a lot.
Be sticky.
For that, yeah, for the action stuff. And then, when you're kind of breaking them down, what do you look for when you look at the script to figure out when you're deciding how much time you're going to do, how much you're going to do? And I've not heard a lot about production design, which hurts me to my core, because that's why indie films look like indie films, because they don't have production design. Whoever.
Sure. So for production design, this film that we just did, most of it was green screen. So, and then we were using miniatures for our background art. So our production design looked a lot different than previous shoots. So we did a lot of plate shots up front, just get a look and feel of what we wanted to do. And that was just literally wandering around with a camera and looking at what we had to shoot on. And then of course our lighting became, in green screen you're lighting for the green screen itself, but you're also lighting, okay, what's the mood of this, and how do they fit into this plate shot? So it was really quick. So that piece of it was fairly complex. We did a lot of test shoots for that, and that's part of your pre-production.
Yeah. And we heard about plates, and when you're talking about compositing, green screen, you shoot with the green, blue, whatever, video wall, and then and the plate is basically the images in the background. Whether it's video, CG, a still image you've used, a crude drawing you stick behind them, whatever, that's generally your plate. And you have layers, sometimes you have multiple plates that you then composite together to make the final image. I know that's more a post-production thing, but just explain terms in case people don't know.
Yes.
That's my job as a moderator.
Yes.
Woo!
And I would add to that if you have complex camera setups, or if you have complicated production design, you're probably going to need to build into your budget like at least one prep day for the DP and for the production designer and so on. In Dungeon of Deceit, for instance, we needed to prep a room in my house to make it look like it was this kid's bedroom from the 80s. We had like tab cans and old Dragonlance fantasy novels and Transformers and He-Man action figures and so on. And that required, he needed a day to assemble all those things, my awesome production designer, B.J. Cock. And then we needed another day to prep the room, and then we're ready to shoot the room. And that can be challenging on an indie budget sometimes when you realize the amount of prep that's required before you shoot.
Yeah. So on top of producing and acting in Total Party Kill, which plays tomorrow in the Nude Block, I also do production design. Originally, when Alan and I were talking about the film, Alan is the director, he kind of, he was like, he sent me some locations, and I was like, these have white walls. And I was like, no. So I found some really cool locations. We ended up settling on one that had this really awesome wallpaper, and it was green, and so choosing things like that already have character to it can add so much to your film without having to, go above budget or anything like that. And then on top of that, when I did the production design for it, I brought in a lot of stuff that had elements of different gaming things or different nerdy things that we would really enjoy seeing in the background, and maybe subconsciously you would pick up on, but you wouldn't necessarily notice. So Alan and I worked together on that a lot. There's actually one thing in there that I snuck in. You can't really see it, but it was this Star Wars plaque, and he really hated it. But I was like, I just kept putting it in random places until he was like, all right, fine, it can live there. But yeah, I would say production design is such a huge part of making your world come together for your film. So planning for that's definitely important.
And that's also where a lot of your budget can end up coming to if you're not used to it. Indie filmmakers tend to forget production design. That
Yes.
a lot of them do, and then they get hit with that in the budget because that can be because you need everything. Everything you see on screen, you need this stuff.
Yeah.
So your props, your set pieces, anything. If you have to repaint something, you may need to paint it, and then you may need to paint it back.
Yeah.
If it's not your wall, but it
Yep.
needs to be a different color or a mural or something, you need to put it back the way it came.
Yeah.
And there's a
A
lot of those
cheat
things.
code.
And-
If you need stuff, put it on a credit card, keep all of the,
Receipts.
tags on it, keep the receipts, and then return it after, like that's. an
But you
option
have to
for
make sure your
keeping
production is
budget.
wrapped up within the return times.
Yes.
You must do that, or you will not be able to return them. We hit
Yeah.
on that when I was doing production design on a film, and they took too long on needing certain props. So went out their budget, not mine.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yep.
But yeah, that stuff to keep in mind too. When you're like, it's all these planning, all these little ideas, all that. Well, you have to keep all that in mind in pre-production
Mhm.
for all those little things and every step of the way and how it's all going to play out. And it's where the thing happens. And then also too, we're talking like the design stuff. Pre-production should be, I think, when you decide on the look of your film, and you should stick to that look.
Yes.
Don't try and do this modern thing of figure out your colors and figure out your grading and figure out everything in post. Or even with like you guys were doing your look, even though you're doing green screen,
Yeah.
you weren't deciding at the
No,
end,
up
it was
front,
deciding in
yeah.
the front.
Deciding up front. Otherwise, it's a lot of work to correct. And now I find it never looks the way you really intended it to look.
No.
So yeah, up front you have to light it the way you need it to look, right? So, and it's complex because when you're doing green screen, you have to manage the green itself, so you're lighting for that, but then you're lighting your cast separately. So it's actually really quite complex to do it, and that is part of your pre-production. Any of those, so because again, you have to have a plan for that. And then you have setups too, where everybody was, because you may not shoot them all together. And that gets complex too. So that pre-production becomes really super valuable, right? Otherwise, I don't know who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
Because they could literally be in a different take, so.
Yeah. I would say bring your colorist on in pre-production too. If you're planning to have your film colored, bring your colorist on, because you want to create a LUT, which is.
Lookup table.
Yes, it's what your film's gonna look like once you're finished with it. It's an idea, it's not gonna be perfectly that, but your colorist can create what's called a LUT, so you know what the color's gonna look like. 'Cause you're never just gonna use what the camera shot. It's very flat, the colors aren't flattering, so you have a colorist. And then what they can do is create that LUT ahead of time, so that when you are setting up shots, they match. Because what can happen is if you don't do that, you've got a shot over here that's too warm, and then the next shot that's supposed to be, the same, in the same time frame is bluer, or something like that. You just want to avoid that if you can.
And it depends on your camera. Some cameras, like I know some of the ARRIs, you can actually load the LUTs directly into the camera and use it in the preview, or some places if you're on these are bigger productions, by the way. So if you're working with like micro budget, you probably don't have an ARRI and you probably don't have a video village. And video village is where all the monitors are and the producers hang out with headphones and everything, and everyone's bustling and watching everything in the preview monitors and stuff. But the video village too, sometimes you can also just have, depending on your setup and flow, which is all there, you can also have a monitor with the LUT programmed in, so you can see that on that what it looks like, but also then have one that's showing you exactly what the camera's showing, and then get also the one of what you want it to look like. And I think on some of the models that already now you can actually split, since you can do split recording, I think you can do one on RAW and one with the LUT baked into the video,
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is really nice for dailies.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And dailies are the things you basically just assemble as you go from rough
And
footage.
you can look up LUTs online.
You can.
Often enough palettes, especially with my students, they say, all the colors I'm going to include. And I actually teach the opposite way. Everything you're going to exclude. And that's going to be what's left over is going to be the core of your color for your film. So it's really about limiting the palette. right? It's not collecting, so we work backwards when we look at color.
And when you do, and when you're also with those two, with those, understanding like LUT is not color grading. It is just giving you a gist of a look. And ideally you have an actual color grader who will then do the nuance to bring it to look.
Yes.
Based on that. That should just be kind of a rough guide. It shouldn't be what you use as you're slapping on, like, you know, red, one that looks like Red Giant or something on there, you know, it's not,
Yes.
you shouldn't be doing that. It should really, you know.
So don't bake in your LUTs.
Yes, don't bake in your LUTs, or just bake them into the dailies and not the final.
Yes.
Yeah. Right, and then, I don't know, any like tips of your own you guys would want to give everyone before we open them up to questions? Do they have any?
I like to think of every department as an aid in telling your story. So your camera movements should be part of telling the story. Your production design should be part of telling the story. And so I think in pre-production, a lot of that, personally, you know, this is just how I like to work, should be planned out. And the more spontaneous you are, or the more planned you are, the more spontaneous you can be. Because it allows you extra time, it allows you to kind of, like I said, see in the beginning, see everything for what it is. When you're on the day, it might be a little bit different than what you were originally planning for. So it does allow you to play more when you're organized.
We do read-throughs, and I found those would be really helpful, getting the cast together, do a read-through, and then some of the stuff that didn't dawn on you to plan for comes up in that read-through. Or our cast will, oh, have you thought about this? Oh, no, I haven't. and therefore you add it at that moment before you get onto set. This is long before that, so we do a read-through. And I've recorded them, done animatics out of it. So where we look at the storyboard, you'll see it come up, and then you're listening to the audio of the read-through. And I found that really helpful too, because then you can make adjustments again before you get to your final shoot. So.
Just in terms of having a storyboard, I think is important, which is something that is not my specialty because I'm not really a visual artist. And so initially before I was able to use AI-generated storyboards, which I don't know if that will be, people might get mad at me and be like, you should have paid an artist to draft your storyboards, but it's like, I'm sorry, it's an indie budget. So I created some of these sort of realistic looking storyboards, and then we can use that at least to guide the camera shots in a way that me drawing stick figures and plopping in clip art can't.
Well, on the animation side, it's all planning, and organizing, and everything has to be so organized, and all it is 90% of the time. Technical troubleshooting. Once you get going, it's either just technical troubleshooting, or just making sure people hit deadlines. That's most of it on that end, because that's how production. Because you get your stuff, and it's just you have to plan everything visually, you have to have everything locked, because you can't make changes. So if you make a mistake in pre-production, you can't really make a change, or not a cheap change, or an easy change down the road. So there isn't improving necessarily a lot of the time. It's like, if you guys get to do on the set, well, let's just cheat this or do that. You don't always get to do that. Or we'll just cut, we'll shoot it 3 ways and figure it out. Because then, no, we have to draw this 3 ways, or I have to render it 3 ways, or I have to, do all of that. And I'm quick, but I'm,
You don't do it that way at all.
you don't do it that
No.
way. You don't do it that way
Because
at all.
it's too consuming.
It is. I mean,
So.
you burn yourself out if you're trying to do 5-10 minutes a week of animation completed.
Yeah.
That's like you'll burn yourself out on those things. And I think that too is like watch for times and plan to keep from burning out your crew and cast as much as possible. I'd say in the pre-production, it's probably the biggest thing. If you can afford it, is give everyone as much time as possible and have off days when you can. Especially if it's really rough, long shoots, to give people a chance to not just burn out.
Yeah.
No, especially, I know you using child actors. We had a similar experience in keeping that day short for them, because the attention span's only going to be so much. you're only gonna get so many good hours out of them. So, yeah, that plays into the same factor, right?
Yeah. And that's also too, like, if you're working with like SAG stuff too, or any of the ones where you have the contracts, you have certain limitations, and you have breaks you have to take, you have certain lunch you have to get by a certain time. They have an 8-hour workday from the minute you pick them up to the minute you drop them off at the hotel. So you know, before it hits overtime, so you got to really focus on, you know, a lot of that stuff. And sometimes, which gets into the the contract side and everything, finding the right contracts, and which gets more nebulous depending on what level and what you're doing. And, or if you're just doing a film with your friends, then it's just you and your friends shooting some stuff, having some fun, and maybe you just plan for a weekend. You know, everyone's at their own level and doing their own thing. And don't ever think it's too daunting on anything, because it's really not. Everything is just, you do one thing, then you do the next thing, then you do the next thing, then you screw everything up, then you fix it, then you try again, and you just repeat until you eventually have a vague idea of what you're doing and you're sitting on a panel talking about it. That's pretty much how it goes. So don't ever think anything's too daunting, or that. I guarantee you everyone up here has made hundreds if not thousands of mistakes on film and in life. So
That's the learning process,
that
right?
is.
Yeah.
You're going to learn, and don't be afraid to fail.
In which case, then there's no bad films, just learning films.
Yeah.
We've got plenty of those.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. So, all right. Do we have any questions, I guess, for people? Okay.
I've got a lot of them,
all right.
but I'll just start with one. So this is for all of you guys, how do you guys choose who to work with in the beginning when you have so many great options, depending on the film that you're working on?
I like to look at websites and reels and have a lot of conversations. I have them read my script before anything to make sure it's something that they're actually interested in. And then I'll usually have a lookbook too, so that they can see what the vision of the film's gonna be. And then I like to find people whose work already kind of matches that. Different genres are gonna require different things of different filmmakers. So if you have something specific, I would say always try to find somebody who's already kind of played in that world and understands it, because it's just gonna make your life easier.
You'll find networking is a big piece. So you get a pool of people that you like to work with, and you're calling back, and it's very much like that. So I've got a group of people that I draw from on a regular basis. That's the way it's done. So.
I also have the same team that I've worked with on the last 2 films. And I think with that, it really came down to finding even just one person who I absolutely trusted, like Kate, the AD who I talked about before, or Jen Page, my sort of partner in film that I've made countless sort of projects with. Like, if she likes this person and thinks that they can do the job and has worked with them on set, then yeah, I'm pretty inclined to trust her. So it's finding that one trustable person, and that can get you a lot of crew.
It's all. I always start with people I know and people I trust as far as the core, and then build from there. Because you want that person that you know you can work with, that you know you can trust, and that's what a lot of it is trust. It really is. Because if you're, depending on what your role is, obviously in the film, but if you're looking at that like from a producing perspective or directing perspective, you can't necessarily always have your fingers in everything. And if the bigger a project gets, the less you can be involved in everything. So you just have to have someone who you know you can trust to get it done. Hey, this is what we need to do. They'll get on the same page. They will come to you with questions, and they will find solutions to not bother you with when the problem arises, unless you need to be involved. That will just handle it. And all of that, just knowing those people and networking and doing stuff, and sometimes too, it even means working on other people's projects in one capacity or another, even if it's not what you normally do. Like, you know, my day job is doing animation, but I've done production design and visual effects work on films. I've done background stuff on a film for people before, or helped out, you know, done gaffing when necessary, or handled other stuff when needed, you know, or even just helped one time move a log for somebody on something, you know, because they just needed help with something, so you just do it. And you build up those relationships and those things and get a feel for people, because it really is a people business.
Yeah.
To me, it's a people business. It's all about people. It's all about connections, and people don't want to work with you if they don't like you and they don't know you, so they have to get to know you, and you have to get to know them too, because you're going to want to work with people you like and you know, And you'd almost rather have the person who isn't as skilled as you like and know than the person who's amazingly skilled who you don't know or you can't trust.
And one thing I would add is even if you find a really trustable person, if she says to you, if she says to you, well, I heard about this person who's really great. No, I want someone who you have firsthand experience with. That was a mistake that I made when it came to the first road. Like, I love you, but this person who you recommended to me based on things that you heard about them is not going to work out.
I think it's also like biased stuff. Like sometimes you can be friends and want someone to do good, but it's not the same as them actually being skilled in the
Yeah.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And part of that too is just being able to be objective with yourself and your friends. Like I'm really critical of all my own stuff, so that's helpful. And I have no problem, telling a friend, hey, that's garbage, don't do that, or that doesn't work. So in a lot of me and my friends, at least we have that kind of open, honest, there isn't going to sugarcoat it sometimes, especially on set, you don't have time for that.
Yeah.
So, you need to be able to tell someone, no, that's dumb. That isn't going to work, here's why it's not going to work, find a solution to make it work.
Yeah.
And then they're not going to get angry about it.
Yeah.
'Cause,
You also want to find people who you can spend 12 hours with.
yeah.
Especially once it starts getting down to you're burning those final hours and everybody's hangry and tired, you want to make sure that, the project is still their passion, and everybody's being kind, respecting one another still. So that's a huge part of it too.
And the less you pay, the more all these other things matter.
Yeah.
They really do, especially volunteer work.
Yes.
It's not their vision, it's not their project, it's yours. They probably honestly don't give a rat's ass about your project, but they may give a rat's ass about you, and that's what's gonna matter the most. Because they're probably never gonna care about your film unless it gets big.
Yes.
They're only gonna care about you. And that's what you have to capitalize on, and that's what you also have to maintain that relationship.
Yeah.
Is budget part of pre-production?
Oh, God,
Okay.
yes.
How do you get a budget, and what are your steps for going about that?
Ours are very little, okay, very little. So we're really trying to stretch it. You look for grants is a big piece that we do, is writing for grants. So you learn how to do that. But yeah, that's a huge animal. Matter of fact, you probably have a whole panel.
There is. There's a
That's the one
financing.
that's
There's a financing panel is the
Yeah,
next
that's right.
panel.
It's one of
I
those.
know.
Yeah.
I'm on that one next
Yeah.
time.
It's a
So
great
yeah,
question.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
finance, like budgeting, not talking like excluding where you get the money, because that's another whole nother panel, whole other topic. You basically have to just look at the money you have, and then you have to have someone who's normally called like a line producer, and they will go through your script and they will look at your budget, and then they will figure out how much every single thing. And if you don't have a line producer, you better learn how to become one, because especially on indie film and small film, you will learn a lot of those roles. So you have to go through and figure out how much does everything cost. Okay, how's that compared to our budget? When do you know to have extra for other things? Like if you're working with union, you know at the bare minimum, assuming it's not deferred, you're actually paying them, so it's like $250 now a day. It's like $250 a day plus the extra you on the back end you have to put in for like insurance and the other stuff if you're on the producing side, if you're working on the SAG-AFTRA things, unless it's like one of the ultra low budgets, the ones where you can defer it, where you basically, unless you make money, and if you never make money, you never pay them. But which are things you do for people for fun or for like shorts and things that never get distribution. That's a whole nother animal though too. But sometimes too. But then you have to know that, and you have to know what is the money, if money's borrowed, when is it due, what are the consequences of that, and you break down everything, how much everything costs, and then figuring it out, and then figuring out what you can get for free, what you cannot get for free, what you have to make, what you have to buy, all that stuff. And then not just budgeting money, you have to budget time. You have to budget your time. Is probably more. You have to be just as good, if not better, at budgeting time than you are at budgeting the money. Money can always buy you time, but time is not always going to buy you money. It's going to get you money, and you only have so many hours in a day. You only have so long you can use that child on set, or you can use the SAG actor on set before you get overtime. You only have so much time to do certain things, to meet distribution windows, to meet deadlines, to do whatever else. And that's where you really have to that's where it really comes down to knowing how long things take, because then everything directs.
And Mike, for the applying for grants, how much of your how much of your storyboarding do you have done before you like go for those grants, or is it?
Not an awful lot, because that's going to help you with your, if you only got so much in your budget, right? That's going to dictate how you're going to go about your shooting.
Yeah.
So you're going to do that up front, and usually it's kind of solitary for us, because we're seeking the money up front. We don't have a pool of people that we're drawing from to do the grants. It's just one or two of us. So
The grant stuff's different in Canada, right?
it is, yeah.
You guys
it
have a
is.
little bit more access to that
Yeah,
than
yeah,
in
we've
the
got a
US.
national film board,
Yeah.
so that's a kind of a go-to for us, which is different down here. It is.
There are grants, and
It took a long time.
it can take a long time. And every grant in the U.S. especially, every grant has different requirements, different schedules, different wants, and you must find out how you relate your project to that grant and that organization's goals. And it may take applying to 10 or 15 times for you to ever even get anything.
Yeah.
And to build those relationships to do it, because again, it's all about relationships. And it's a lot of stuff, and you never can guarantee. You can almost never guarantee it.
Yeah, I'm a former accountant, so I have a spreadsheet. I'm like, all right, it all starts with a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
Yes, I know that if I don't have a free location, that's probably going to be my most expensive thing. Next thing, because I work in horror a lot, is going to be special effects. It's always a huge cost that's really difficult to get around because materials cost X amount of money. So I would say always try to figure out what your largest pieces are going to be first. See if you can afford those, and if not, can you tailor your script to make it smaller? I've made things for $0, and you can tell they're for $0, but the story's good, so people don't really care about that. They're more forgiving, especially on the independent side. And it depends on which genre you're into. If you're in comedy, as long as you're making people laugh, you don't really care about as much. So it really depends on what you're trying to make, and I'd say figure out what you can afford, and then take a fraction of that. Save some of that, because additional costs are going to pop up always, and then see what you can make with that smaller budget. But yeah, I'd say if you have a free location, right around
That's the
that.
best bet.
Right around that, yeah. Make your entire script around that free location, because that's always going to be your biggest cost.
And don't forget your post-production budget. A lot of people forget
Yes.
that during pre-production. Don't forget to do post, and also don't forget if you're doing festival runs or anything else like that, because you want to know you have your finishing cost, and then if you are going to do any kind of festivals, part of your marketing or PR strategy, assuming you're even going to have one, with the short film, but on the larger productions, you're usually going to have some sort of festival. So you're going to enter into as part of your strategy for trying to get distribution and all the other stuff. So you do need money for that. You need a budget for that up front. Ideally, so you have to go begging for it later after the film's finished to try and be able to put it into festivals.
And then if you have a feature, then there may be distribution-related expenses that are going to come up, like getting E&O insurance, errors and omissions insurance, getting. Distributors have different requirements, but getting like a title report where there are companies that will make sure that your title or something similar to it is not already in use and presenting copyright or trademark concerns. Some of them require script reports, which is basically somebody going through the script and saying, is there anything in here that could potentially qualify as copyright or trademark infringement that is going to freak out the distributor. In the context of a short, you're just making yourself, thankfully, at least that's not going to come up, because that's not going to. Distributors are largely only interested in features for better or worse.
What mushrooms I said? Yes.
Who are the best people, in your opinion, to take on location scouts?
I'd say that, for me, it would be the DP, the director of photography, because it's really about making sure that we can both realize our visions in the context of the location. And I'm not going to bring Nick, the DP I normally work with there, and have him be like, well, what is this? I can't work with this.
I would also say, besides DP, you definitely want to bring your production design. Your lead production designer needs to be there, because they need to be able to assess every space. And if you're doing any kind of visual effects work, bring a VFX coordinator with you, whether it's practical or you're doing, post. You need someone there who can also tell you whether or not that's gonna work or not. Like, I worked on a film and we had to try and explain to somebody, because they said that the director, shot didn't get used because we told them, this is supposed to be an effect shot on here, and you have a thing that's moving in the background. They're not gonna be able to roto around the person. Your budget, I guarantee you, your VFX guys aren't gonna be able to roto that out. That you need to, for that. If it was a still image, they could have probably done a quick matte and roto a lot easier for this quick effect, but they didn't, and they didn't shoot the plates right, and they decided they wanted to shoot the handheld, and there's no way they were gonna get the rope removal and the wire removal done. So then they lost the shot that they literally spent 3 hours doing, ended up not being in the final film because they didn't listen to they didn't have the VFX person on set when they were location scouting, and they didn't listen to them on the shoot.
Depending on your crew size too,
Yeah.
I'd say you always want to bring your production manager, whoever's going to be managing your production. They're going to figure out where your base camp is, where all of your crafty goes, where everybody's going to eat lunch, and all those things are things that you don't want to have to worry about as a director.
Right.
So I'd say definitely them, and then bring your producers too, because they can always chat. I mean, their job's going to be to chat with the location manager to see what's the lowest amount we can get it for.
I think also, I haven't said the director, but the director itself is going to be a key visionary, right? So, and you're likely directing your own, so
Yeah.
I mean, you and your DP probably makes the most sense when you're doing an indie film. The two of you.
I'll just keep going with my questions if no one else
And I'll just add one thing too, because when you're doing indie film, you wear a lot of hats. So sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes it does get blurred on what role really does what. So just keep in mind as you progress and as your career keeps going up, and I'm sure you'll do great as you keep going on. As you get more successful and get more professional, understand that sometimes there are distinctions to the roles, and when you're gonna have to start handing off things. Just keep that in mind. Just a general tip.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's a
Yeah.
great part of pre-production
Yeah.
too for a smaller crew, is defining who's handling what, because
Yeah.
everybody is wearing so many hats.
Yeah.
So even if you're the first AD, you might be the first AD and the production manager, and you're also the coordinator, and you're also a PA. There's just so much that you have to take on as an independent filmmaker. So defining those things ahead of time so that everybody knows what they're doing is very helpful.
Great. Next question, I guess. Keep firing.
Me?
Yeah, sure. No one else had their hand up.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question?
I got one more, really. Actually, I got two more, so if we can
No,
switch
you're-
off.
yeah,
For
keep
storyboarding, you were saying that it's good to prioritize. How do you go about that? Like, what do you choose? And then also, who does the storyboarding? Like,
On independent sets, literally, it's whoever's got the art skills to do it. And often enough, for us, it's going to be the person who's doing the effect too, because they've got to get it straight in their mind how we're going to accomplish the effect. So we'll storyboard very specifically, shot for shot, when we're doing a visual effect. We go to just general storyboarding. You mentioned a dialogue scene. Dialogue scene isn't a huge deal, so that will just give a very general overview on our boards. And then that, when you're incorporating the two, you also got to be thinking your storyboards are going to include the motion of it. So we draw that in on our storyboards.
like the
as well.
camera motion?
Yeah, exactly, right? So we have, we just do it up with lines, right? Showing zooms, or is it a pan, tilts, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
We'll make note of that on the board itself.
In notes, sometimes there'll be a lot of notes around your storyboard when you're as you're going, and sometimes, especially if you're doing multiple drafts of your storyboards, you'll end up with a lot of notes. There may be one picture and everything around it scribbled in and on, and you're noting things, and it's always a revision process, especially the animation side. You gotta really lock stuff down. Although I've even worked on animated projects that just had shot list.
Yeah.
So,
yeah,
which is
yeah.
also a valid thing too. If you can't
Yeah.
do a storyboard, do a
Yeah.
shot list.
Yeah.
You can do. I've seen people do storyboards. I've seen people do storyboards with Legos and figurines. I've seen people do storyboards with just their friends and sticking them in the position. And one DP I was doing some work in the art department on, he went out and he was the DP, because he liked to do all the boarding stuff for himself, went out and brought the stand-ins to all the locations and did quick boarding
Nice
with
idea.
with the stand-ins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it was actually a production that actually had stand-ins. Or your actors, and did quick things so they could work out all the shots and get other things and work for them and figure it out. Because it's not just the individual shot; it's the flow of shots, and that's, I think, one
And
of
it
the
help
key.
with your blocking too.
It does.
right? Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
Because you have to know that. Like, you have to know it's not just we're here. You're not just here on the whole thing. Sometimes you're here, and then but this person's moving over there.
Yeah.
How does this one angle then compare with the next? You really have to think through all that in your boarding process,
Yeah.
which is why sometimes animatics are so nice.
Mhm.
If you can do them, but you probably can't at an indie level, or you don't. That is also very time consuming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say, so I've directed a film where we did shoot to edit, which is you have the storyboard, you shoot exactly what's on the storyboards. The thing about that is in post when you're editing, sometimes it doesn't piece together in the way that you thought it would.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, so
exactly.
make sure
Yeah.
you're getting enough coverage where like, if you
Yeah.
have to cut away, you can do that.
Yeah.
You know, make sure you have your wides, for establishing, because sometimes it just doesn't piece together, and then you're stuck there like, oh my god, how do I fix this? Because I don't have enough additional shots to fill it in now.
Even just having a master shot, right, one where, because you're guaranteed continuity by doing a
Yes.
master shot, right? So that's gonna be a main board for you, is what's your master look like?
And the establishing shots too, building on that, always, even for the writing process, at least what you're making your shooting script, write in your establishing shots if possible. Like shot of Long Country Road or whatever, even into the script, or exterior of apartment building, like
Yeah, the B-roll.
put those in there because people forget those. And if it's not there in pre-production, it's not there in the script, or unless you don't get it to the boards. If it's not in the script, it's not in the board most of the time.
Yeah.
And then it's a lot easier to send someone out, even if you just have to take a still photo. I know I worked on one web series and they forgot to do establishing shots, so they literally just sent someone out with a still camera, shot locations really quick, and then we just animated the stills, like add a little motion to them, maybe add a flashing light on somewhere in a shot. Because they're like 3 seconds.
Yeah.
2 to 3 seconds is
Yeah.
all it is. It sells it.
Yeah.
Piece of trash or a leaf blows through the foreground. It does it for what's working.
And then just to take a step back, the reason these storyboards are so important is that, well, like I was talking about, you're going to have a limited amount of time on set, and the majority of that time is going to be spent getting these camera setups. And so you want to understand before you get on set, ideally, what exactly the camera setups are going to be, and if you can fit all the setups that you want to do into the time that you have.
My turn? This one's specifically for Chris. So what does your season look like? I've talked to a few teachers, and a lot of the time their schedule with film or writing or anything is like in the summer away from their school. But what does your schedule look like with film and also being an attorney in your day job?
Well, I have a somewhat unique situation. I mean, when I was going to law school, I could never have imagined that this was possible. I thought I've got to go to a big law firm or I've got to be a law professor. That excited me at the time. And then after about 4 years of being in a big law firm, it no longer excited me. And I decided to have my own law practice. Basically, the way I do it now is I have a room of my house that is devoted to doing law stuff, and then I have another one that is devoted to doing film/music. And I can kind of shuttle between them on an as-needed basis.
Put on the different hats in different rooms.
Yeah, because if I'm doing my own law practice, there's no need for me to report to an office where I'm under observation by the boss to make sure that I never leave or something like that. I can't even imagine doing that right now. That's worked out for me so far. Of course, because the client is my boss, the clients are my bosses, I have to be judicious about not taking on an amount of work that will make it impossible for me to do creative stuff. That would almost render pointless the whole the law stuff that I do, because the whole purpose of that is to kind of finance my continued weird creative stuff.
Perfect.
Next, do you have one last?
Yeah, one last question for you too, Chris. How does music play into pre-production, and is that even a part of it?
Yeah. Well, in terms of, if you're working with an editor who is very hands-on, you can discuss what shots are going to look like with the editor and how how the rhythm of the music is going to determine sort of the rhythm of the edit. Like if you've seen Baby Driver or something like that, that's a film that takes that to the extreme, where and Edgar Wright did work with the DP and the editor in pre-production so that all of these like precise shot changes would occur on beats in like a British glam songs from the 70s or something like that. That's sort of an extreme example, but yeah, you could bring music in like that. Because my primary background is as a composer, I do find myself imagining what the cue, like the discrete piece of music is going to sound like when I'm doing a shot, and then I can manipulate the pace of the shot based on that. Like let's move a little slow, and then the cue starts to build, and so on. So I think that it's useful to have both of those sort of hats that I've worn in the past.
And it also plays into your budgeting though, your music, because you need to know how much does your composer have to make, how many
Yeah.
things are they doing original stuff for, and if you want to use any kind of licensed music, you need to figure out what the royalties and costs are and what the contracts are around that. Like maybe you can use this song for your short film, if it's a short film, for film festivals, but you can never sell it. Or there'll be other rights like that. That's like why music rights are their own issue. So when you do start using any kind of like licensed real music, that's why they don't have the full series of WKRP out on DVD because of all the rights issues, and that was before streaming and DVD existed. So a lot of that stuff you have to find the right contract and how much it costs. Maybe that song will cost you nothing. Maybe it'll cost you $1 million. You never know what they're going to ask. And sometimes that $1 million may just be the go away price.
For us, independents, creative comedies is the route you have to go with for film festivals. So you're looking for material like that. I found a lot of young artists really want the exposure, so contact them and let them know up front that you want to use it. Often enough, that's an accolade for them. So.
And sometimes knowing the difference too on what is and isn't you can do. Like I remember watching a documentary about like a bunch of these like old like rock and punk guys who are now dads. I forgot what it's called now, but it was a really cool one. It had like Flea and a bunch of them in there, and they're kind of transitioning out of suburban dad life. And one of the things was like in that there were songs they couldn't play the song from like the radio or the CD, but because of the way some of the licensing works, some of these guys wrote them. They could literally play it themselves on camera or the music that they played. So maybe you can't do that studio edit, but maybe you're friends with someone or know someone or they're involved in the project, and maybe they can perform it live for you or edit for you, which is also something to take into consideration depending on who you know and what you're doing, or if you have friends in a band, and they have original music.
That's a big one, friends in a band.
And
Yeah.
Oh
I
yeah.
use that a lot.
just not a cover band.
Yeah. True. Yeah, right? Yeah, true.
This one's for Mike. As someone who's coming out of college this December, do you work with high school or college kids?
High school. Yeah.
What is some advice that you have for either high schoolers looking to go to secondary school or just emerging, or even just college students emerging into quote unquote the real world, even though we're like doing it all anyways?
I'd say get experience right now.
Mhm.
As an extra, you can get on as an extra. So my students who are looking at film school, before they even go, I say, well, be an extra, and you have this wonderful opportunity because there's a lot of downtime as an extra, and you get to watch, and you're around it all, and you'll eventually pick up, oh, that's the DP. Okay, that's a lighting. Like you understand positions, and you can actually follow with eyes. You're not allowed on set specifically, but you'll be able to know what they're doing day to day. Do you know what I mean? So get a little bit of experience under your belt. You can get on as a PA as well, and this will give you invaluable experience if you want to spend the time and money to go to something like film school. Before you get to that point, get a little bit of experience. It's a great way of starting.
And then I have one last question for you, Christine. As someone who has been a lot of places, LA, New York, pretty much everywhere, what are some strengths in being in specific places, and then what are some strengths that you have to kind of have yourself to be anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you have to be in order to be anywhere, you really have to figure out the culture of where you are. Building your networks in LA and New York, you know, it's important, but I also think that in this digital era, you can kind of create from anywhere. So while it's, you know, you can have networks in LA and New York, it doesn't guarantee you anything. I'd say start in your current community, you know, find local filmmakers, and then figure out what your strengths are, what you enjoy about filmmaking, and feed those. I think being kind of a chameleon's fun and fine, and I like being able to be on both coasts, but eventually you're gonna wanna find a place to settle down, you know, and having your film community there and figuring out what you want out of film for yourself is gonna be so important. So I think figuring out who you are, both as a person, as a filmmaker, is probably gonna be your biggest strength, and then finding yourself in the right place. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions? It's about our time, so if you always kind of remind everyone when and where your film is playing.
My film is Total Party Kill. It is playing tomorrow at noon in the Gamer Block.
And my film is Bono Eversong and the Day the Music Died, and it's playing in the Fantasy Block, which is at 3:30 today.
My film's called Dungeon of Deceit, and it's also playing at 3:30.
All right, well, thank you guys for coming, and thank you for being here. Everyone.
Thank you.